So you watch this channel, and by now you know what batoning is. That's right, it's carrying your favorite flashlight from the Baton series by Olight. And you're like, But some dude also says, hey, where can you buy those flashlights? Glad you asked, some dude who always asks me questions. GoingGear.com, who provided their batons for review. And then someone else is like, hey, how does that copper baton look after a few months of carry? Glad you asked. Beautiful, like a roll of used pennies. But today we're not talking about currency, we're talking about our batons, specifically the newly introduced SR1 and SR2 baton, which feature an upgraded USB charging capability. It's a USB cord on one end and a magnetic tail cap thing on the other that you get near the base and it clicks properly into place, like some of those magnetic laptop chargers. And it's much nicer than the sometimes flaky micro USB ports in most USB rechargeable lights. Seriously, this is a big upgrade. Red means it's charging, and green means it's charged. You'll need to supply your own charging brick though, because the world is a cold, cruel rock. Both are just slight variations on the basic everyday carry style light that the Olight baton is known for. The main differences are the size, this is of course between the two, the type of battery they use, and some difference in the upper end of the brightness range and run times. There's a lot of things they share though, which is why I'm lumping them both into this review. They both use lithium-ion batteries, different sizes of course. They both use TIR optic lenses like the other lights in the Baton series, and use cool white XML2 emitters. Sorry, no neutral white on these. Both are constructed out of anodized aluminum and ideal for pocket carry. They're waterproof and dustproof to IPX8 standards. And what do they come with? Both come with a battery, a USB charging cable, a lanyard for your growing collection, and a manual in the plastic box. The SR1 comes with a 550 mAh RCR123 rechargeable lithium-ion battery, and the S2R comes with a 3200 mAh 18650 rechargeable battery. Both batteries can be charged in standard lithium-ion chargers, but if you want to charge in the lights, you'll need to use these specific batteries. They got a special ring on the top. You cannot charge standard lithium-ion batteries in these lights. The S1R takes about an hour to charge its included battery, and the S2R takes about 4 to 5 hours from a full depletion. Aftermarket batteries can be used in both of these lights and they still work. I only did brief tests though for basic functionality only. The S1R may be pickier with batteries because you need high drain ones, especially on the Turbo S mode. Mine shut down quickly after going into Turbo S. This is with the aftermarket battery. The S2R doesn't seem to have quirks with batteries in my brief testing, although you'll need to use button top cells only in both lights. But again, if you stick with the batteries included, you're good. Here are the basic dimensions. It comes down to, if you like smaller everyday carry lights, you'll sacrifice run times and brightness, but you get a lighter, more pocketable light in the S1R. Equally functional though. If you use your lights for long periods of times and light up bigger places, go with the S2R. Okay, so we know the lights are basically operated the same and have a similar mode layout, but the S2R baton is brighter. Even with the smaller sized and smaller capacity battery, the S1R tries to keep up. So let's go over brightness levels side by side with figures of mine and Olight's. I know it's a lot of figures on the page. First is moonlight. All good everyday carry lights should have a good moonlight. Your opinion may differ on what a good moonlight level is. Then is a respectable low mode. Then is medium, where the lights have a pretty big departure in brightness now. There's also a big difference on high. Remember, the S1R is smaller, so it doesn't have a lot to do with the heat and has a smaller capacity battery. Turbo steps down on both, like Turbo does on just about all lights I've reviewed on this channel. That's just how it is. And then finally, the S1R has an additional 6th mode called Turbo S with a step down. It helps the S1R achieve a similar amount of brightness to the S2R when you need about 900 lumens, because that's something everyone needs, right? How about that user interface? First, you need to make sure the battery is inserted correctly, which is slightly different than most lights because the positive end for the battery faces the tail cap on the Baton series, at least the ones I have tested. It has reverse polarity protection, so it won't damage your light, but it won't turn on if the battery isn't inserted the right direction. Also, before you charge or operate the light, remove the plastic from the battery tip. Or whatever. Okay, so these lights basically operate the same. I'll first use the S2R to demonstrate the basic functionality of both lights, and then pick up the S1R and show you how to access the extra mode, because that's really where they differ. Okay, so press the side switch once. It turns on. Now, press and hold for the light to cycle through the 4 main modes, from moonlight to low to mid to high, then over again, but it goes back to low. It cuts moonlight out. It has mode memory for moonlight, low, mid, and high. This is true for both models, except for the high on the S1R, which I'll detail in the last 10 minutes of this demonstration. You have a shortcut to moonlight at any time from off by pressing and holding the side switch. Release the button when it turns on in moonlight. Handy in the middle of the night when you need only a little light. Remember, the S2 copper didn't have mode memory on moonlight. Well, Olight fixed that. To access turbo at any time, double-click the switch from off or on. Turbo is not saved into mode memory on either light. It also has a 3 or 9 minute timer you can set on any of the lower modes, like even high. Just double click and press. 1 blink is for the 3 minute timer. To get to the 9 minute timer, double click and press and it'll blink twice, meaning it's in 9 minutes. You can go to either or. You can go back to the 3 minute mode by double clicking and pressing, and it'll blink once again for the 3 minute mode. Okay. So strobe is accessed by a triple click at any time if you're drunk or not drunk. You can lock both lights out by pressing and holding from off. It enters moonlight mode first, then locks out. It'll keep the light from accidentally being turned on. Press and hold for over 1 second from lockout mode to unlock it. When moonlight comes on, you'll be out of lockout. You can always mechanically lock out both lights by unscrewing the tail cap just a slight turn. This is the method I prefer. Okay, so there's some differences between S1 and S2's user interfaces. It's the Turbo S mode. You can access Turbo S on the S1R by double-clicking to get into Standard Turbo first, and then double-clicking again to get into Turbo S. For 10 minutes after you turn it off, if you are on High, Turbo, or Turbo S, it always reverts back to High when you turn it off and turn it back on. After 10 minutes, it goes back to Medium. That was the difference I was talking about earlier. So that's the one main difference between the S1R and the S2R. Okay, now if this wasn't the most boring thing you've ever watched, then it was the most boring thing I've ever shot. You're like, are you sure about that? That's okay. It's worth the 3,000 views I'll get over the next year on this video. Some people have asked why I don't do more light reviews, and that's why. Okay, so how about the runtimes? For this test, I used the included batteries with each light, and for what it's worth, you'll get much shorter runtimes on the smaller light. Duh. Both batteries are the same chemistry and output the same voltage, but the physical capacity of the larger battery gives you longer runtimes. Again, it's obvious. I'll put both lights in here because it saves time, and you can decide if the size is a trade-off for runtimes for you. First is Turbo and Turbo S. On Turbo and Turbo S, the S1R steps down pretty quick, almost very, very similarly. So does the high mode on the S2R. Now, some people comment sometimes that sucks, and why don't we have lights that don't step down? Well, all lights do this on their high. Well, not all their highs, but their turbo modes. I don't own a single light that doesn't step down on turbo mode after just a few minutes. Anyway, as you can see, the S1R and Turbo S have very similar step downs, with the Turbo S stepping down a few minutes before Turbo because its initial burst mode was higher. You get nearly an hour of brightness out of both before they step down a second time, and both modes cut off just a few minutes under the hour-and-a-half mark on the S1R. The S2R starts stepping down about 2 hours and 45 minutes, and it continues dimming until about 5 hours and 28 minutes before shutting off entirely. There's also a red light under the switch that comes on telling you it's time to charge. If the big drop in brightness doesn't clue you in, dummy. Next is high. The S1R runs nearly as long as it does on Turbo and Turbo S mode. It starts dimming right under the hour mark and cuts off at an hour and 29 minutes. The S2R does its own thing for 2 hours and 45 minutes before dimming and continues on before shutting off at around 5 hours. So technically it runs shorter, the S2R, than it does on Turbo because it runs at a higher brightness longer. The Turbo mode step down lower very early on than the sustained brightness on high. Got it? Then you have medium on both lights. They both run steadily for quite some time before the S1R begins dimming at 4 hours and 25 minutes and shuts off at about 5 hours and 2 minutes in. Meanwhile, the S2R says, I gotcha, and runs nearly for 16 hours before starting to dim. It shuts off at about 18 hours and 3 minutes in. Pretty nice run times, and the rest of them you can do on your own time. If the user interface demonstration and the run times weren't punishment enough, now we have the beam shots. Here are the lights we'll be comparing. All lights are set to their maximum, and like all of my reviews, I use my measured figures in the beam shot section instead of the manufacturers. First we'll pit the S2R against everything, and then we'll do the S1R. I don't know, the S2R is plenty of light. Let's, for science, compare it to the S2 copper I reviewed a while back. They should look very similar. You want one if you want the copper, you want the other one if you want the charging capability. I won't use this one again in the second half. Back to the S2R for a second. Doot. Then the S1R. I'm using the Turbo S mode for a second, and then Then let's go to the S2R again, and then now the Zebralight SC600 Mark III. My everyday carry. It has more throw, so at the distance the hotspot is larger. The overall output is close though. Back to the Olight S2R for a second, which has just a quarter of the rated throw the Zebralight did. Now let's do the Nitecore MH20 GT. A throwier light than both the last three I've done. This and the Zebralight are a little better suited for situations where you need to light up distances further away. Back to the S2R for a second. And now to the old favorite, the Budget Lightform, or BLF A6. Remember that review? It's got like my third most on a flashlight review ever. It isn't as throwy of a light, but still has a higher candela rating. Back to the S2R one more time. Okay, now let's do the second half of the Beamshot section, the S1R segment. I already compared the S2R and S1R, so why don't we compare the S1R to its predecessor, the old S1 baton. I'll reiterate that this distance is a bit of a struggle for a close range light like the S1 at a little over 500 lumens. Now back to the S1R. Again, definitely worth an upgrade for the increased brightness and well-designed charging system. Now the S1R against the Zebralight SC600W Mark III HI for a few seconds, and then we'll go back to the S1R. Again, these are all much bigger lights that have brighter highs than the S1R. Now back to the Nitecore MH20 GT, which you saw earlier, and it's even throwier than the Zebralight again. Now to the S1R again, and then let's do the BLF A6 light before we end the beam shot section, and it's almost over, I promise. Okay, if you want a tiny bright light, the S1R is nearly unrivaled. For people who don't need longer run times and slight brightness increases, then the S1R is a great choice. I tend to carry larger lights, so the size and the weight of the S2R is better, and I like the longer run times and higher sustained brightness. But in all honesty, I use my lights in small bursts throughout the week, so logically there isn't even a reason why I should carry a big light. Anyway, one other advantage I could think of is the S2R has a lower moonlight. It's only slightly lower. I have no idea why, but it's a nice Zebralight style moonlight, which is a compliment, of course, and flashlight, compliments of however that goes. Also, both have magnetic bases, so you can stick them to ferrous surfaces to use as work lights. If you don't know what ferrous means, well, it's a type of wheel. My eyes are my camera. Notice no visible PWM on any of the modes, and if I had one complaint about the UI, it's that strobe and the timer are very similar button presses. Strobe, of course, is easy to access, but the timer is kind of hard to get the timing down without a bit of practice. I'm sure you saw me screw it up a few times. Anyway, if you like this review, tell others to watch my reviews, leave a comment, subscribe, give it a thumbs up, and buy this light at goinggear.com. Check out the description for some details on a coupon code, which may expire at any time, so please don't get mad if it does, like a year or 6 months down the road. This is for people who buy the light now. Goinggear.com provided both of these lights for review, and Marshall is a real chill dude, so buy stuff there. Thanks for watching, everyone.